My name is Rashad. I'm a general English and IELTS teacher, and at the same time, I'm a translator. And today, in this video, I will be talking about IELTS exam. Let's talk about part number one. Part number one usually lasts for 4 or 5 minutes, and you will have simple questions like, let's say, where you live, what you do in your free time, and some other simple things. What about part number two? You will be given 1 minute to prepare, and then you will have 1 or 2 minutes to answer. The type of the question is anything that starts with describe. Part number three is directly linked to part number two. Let's say that your question in part number two was describe a gift. So in part number three, you will probably be asked, like, do you think it is important to give presents? Or do presents have specific meanings in your country? So it is related to that. Once you have finished part number two, you can be relaxed, because if you know the topic in part number two, then it will be easier to answer. As you saw in the picture, there are 4 main criteria, such as pronunciation, fluency, vocabulary or lexical resource, and grammar. And I will be talking about each of them. First, let's start with pronunciation. First of all, let's talk about the accent. Some students ask me, should I speak British accent, American accent, Australian, or like standard English? Well, actually, accent doesn't matter as long as you don't make a lot of mistakes in your speech. You don't need to imitate, like, for example...
Oh, Harry Potter! I'm Hermione Granger. And you are?
Ron Weasley.
Pleasure. You two better change into your robes. I expect we'll be arriving soon. You've got dirt on your nose, by the way. Did you know? Just there.
And the next most important thing is speak clearly. Don't mumble, and try to make sure that you are understood by the examiner himself. Now let's shift to the next point, which is fluency. Now let's talk about fluency. What is fluency? It is how quickly you are able to respond to the questions. When we talk about fluency, it should be noted that it is not speaking too fast, because it's not a rap competition, and like speaking very fast will not impress anyone, because the most important thing is to be understood. Don't speak too fast, don't speak too slowly. Just try to keep the same speed throughout the speech, throughout the exam. And when you speak, you have to make sure that you are understood by the examiner, because he is the person who assesses you. And you can also use some expressions to gain some time to think about what to say next. For example, let's say that you want to make your sentence, but you have some hesitations. You can use an intro like this. Well, it is a tough question, or, well, that's an interesting question. I have always thought about this. And this will give you extra 2 or 3 or 4 seconds. Or based upon my own observations, I can easily say that, and it will give you 4 seconds, but don't speak too fast, to think about what to say next. Then, how to improve your fluency. You should talk to yourself a lot. If you can't talk to yourself, or if you think that this is weird and crazy, well, you can find someone to talk to. It can be your partner or someone who you study with, or you can go to conversation clubs and speak in English as much as you can, because The best way to improve speaking is, yes, speaking. And don't try to think in this language. Try to speak in this language because you must work your muscles. And now let's shift to vocabulary. First of all, you shouldn't forget that it is an official test and you have to be formal and polite. What do I mean by saying formal? For example, there are some expressions in English language, such as slangs, for example. I'm gonna, or let's say kids or stuff. You shouldn't use those things. You may think that it looks cool, but it is not cool at all. You have to speak correctly. And instead of saying gonna, say going to. Instead of saying kids, say children. Instead of stuff, you can use things, items, belongings, and other things. What do I mean by saying be polite? When you don't understand what the examiner says, don't say what or say it again. Say pardon me or excuse me, or let's say I beg your pardon. It's more official. I beg your pardon. Could you please repeat what you have just said? That is going to be much better. When we use foreign words to the English language, it is much better to explain that. For example, if you talk about a movie, which is Ulduz, you should probably translate it into English. Like, for example, there are a lot of movies that I have watched, but if I have to choose a particular one, it has to be Ulduz, which means star in Azerbaijani language. Or if you talk about your summer holidays and if you say that you went to Gabala or Quba, you should probably explain where Quba is located. For example, well, last year we went to Quba with my family members. It is a city in the northern part of Azerbaijan. Yes, do not memorize because it will sound artificial and the examiner will understand that it was a prepared speech. Instead of that, you could use several techniques and ways to improve your speech and vocabulary. First of all, try to read a lot, particularly from bbc.co.uk, or an alternative address is bbc.com, or Science Today, or any other news platforms. And while reading, of course, there will be some words that you don't know, and you should write them down and memorize them. And I advise you to download an application which is called Quizlet, and you will see the name for that, Quizlet. Yes, that is a very useful application. It's easy to use. You will add words in your native language and in English language, and then you will play like a game, and it will help you to memorize the things. Finally, let's talk about the most important tips. First of all, be flexible. You should know that the questions will keep changing so that you will shift from one topic to another topic. So that's why you have to be prepared for many different topics. I advise you to work on them before you have your official exam. Just try to discuss it with your friends, with your teacher, and so that you will be ready if the question comes up. Then, kill two birds with a single stone. What does it mean? For example, in part number 2, the questions will be describe a person in your family that you admire, or describe a person that you admire. Well, actually, two of them can be the same person. It can be your father, your brother. So if you choose two things for one, then it will be much easier to cover many topics. Or, for example, describe a famous person in Azerbaijan, or describe a comic actor in Azerbaijan. By the way, it was an IELTS question in part number 2 in December, and one of my students had that. So you can talk about a comedian who is also famous in Azerbaijan. So you will have a single answer for two different topics. Then the next point is, do not panic. Well, you are kindly asked and advised to go there earlier to experience the atmosphere, to see how the, let's say, students react to, let's say, the atmosphere there. And if you spend there at least 10 or 15 minutes, that will make you feel less nervous. And the last but not the least is that you have to keep practicing a lot. Use any chance to speak to foreigners, to your friends. Don't ask anything in Azerbaijani language. Try to do that in English. And use your muscles, I told you earlier. Thank you for watching, and the very best of luck to you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you find it useful, don't forget to share, subscribe for more videos. Bye.